I get this record pending coming up, I do.
Should we do it?
Hang on, we are started.
Recording.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for attending today. I'd like to go through, please, the agenda. Are we going to hand over to start with?
No, first of all, apologies for absence.
Yes, sorry, I didn't know if you wanted me to go an overview first.
No, it's fine.
Have we had any apologies?
Yes, Chair. Apologies from Councillor Graham Thomas.
Great, thank you. And then any disclosures, please, of personal or prejudicial? Anybody to declare? No? And then the minutes, please. Everybody had a chance to read through them? And is there anything that needs to be brought to the attention? Any amendments? So can we then that the minutes will be approved?
Yes.
Okay, I don't know if you want to just put your hands up to say approved.
Approved.
Thank you very much. Okay, on item 4, I'd like to hand over, if I may, to Tracy, who will introduce Alice Griffith, please.
Thank you, Chair. Moving to agenda item 4, which is a consultation by the Public Service Ombudsman for Wales revised guidance on code of conduct. There is a covering report, and attached to your papers will be both the revised guidance for councils and also for community and town councils. I'm going to hand over to my colleague Aled, who's been doing a lot of work on this. He in fact drafted the report and he's been going through the guidance. So I'll just hand over to Aled, who will briefly take you through both revised versions.
Thank you, Tracy, and thank you to the committee for inviting me here. This is my first standards committee, so please be gentle with me. The Public Service Ombudsman has proposed a revised guidance on the Code of Conduct. There's a consultation process which is going out at the present, and the closing date is the 21st of March 2021, which is Sunday. So the report really is just to garner the committee's views on the proposed changes to the guidance, and if there are any comments on the revised guidance, then I'm happy to collate those responses. The background to this is set out in my report. The Public Service Ombudsman of Wales issues guidance on the Code of Conduct to assist councillors in understanding and interpreting its provisions. There's separate guidance for county councillors as well as community councillors. The large body of the guidance is the same, but there are slight nuances for county councillors, particularly in the realms of the community council clerks. The Code of Conduct itself hasn't changed, so it's simply how the Ombudsman issues its guidance. So the proposed changes, the Ombudsman last reviewed his guidance in July 2016, and the revised guidance includes updated examples on issues that have arisen, cases that have gone before the adjudication panel as well as the High Court, and those are also included in the revised guidance. The changes to the guidance don't fundamentally alter the current advice on the meaning of the code. There's a lot of emphasis on the changes which seek to improve the layout. It improves the clarity, and as I said, it provides recent examples and the outcome of real life cases. What's the old guidance, the paragraphs seem to run into each other, whereas the new guidance is more spaced out. There's use of bold text, and there's greater emphasis on key messages. The principal changes appear to be an expanded explanation of the two-stage test that the Ombudsman applies to decide whether a complaint should be investigated. The test itself hasn't changed, in that it's still a two-stage test. So the first stage is whether there is direct evidence that a breach has taken place. The second stage now includes an additional public interest factor. So the guidance sets out public interest factors that the Ombudsman needs to take into consideration. He's included a new public interest factor, and that's the consideration of previous misconduct of referral to a standards committee or the adjudication panel for Wales. So the guidance refers to having to take account of previous adjudication decisions and precedents set by court cases, and it makes specific reference to the cases of Heesum and Calver, which considers the scope of and legitimate restrictions to a politician's right of freedom of expression under Article 10 of the European Convention on Human Rights. And the guidance is consequent on these judgments, particularly conduct towards junior officers and community clerks. The guidance also has slightly clearer and more emphatic guidance on freedom of speech, as it affects the requirement to treat people with respect, the prohibition on bullying and bringing the office into disrepute. So as mentioned before about the Article 10 provisions, the revised guidance sets out clearly that Article 10 provides a right to freedom of expression, but this relates to political comments and it should not include personal comments. However, it does have to be read in light of the Calver case, which appears at example 6. The Ombudsman has confirmed that they may also decline to investigate a complaint where the member has raised political issues with officers, but this would not include threats to an officer's position or well-being. There seems to be a sliding scale as well, in that the higher up the hierarchy you go, officers are expected to be more robust. So heads of service and chief executive would get lesser protection than more junior officers. Now, this is consistent with the previous guidance, but the revised guidance confirms that the adjudication panel has made a number of findings against members who have sought inappropriately to use their position of power relative to junior officers to influence the actions of those officers, or whom have made unwarranted comments about the performance or actions of officers. And now the community councillor guidance on this point is very similar to the county council guidance, but the Ombudsman notes his concern about the number of complaints received by community council clerks against the behaviour of some community councillors. And due to the scale and nature of the community and town council, the Ombudsman draws a distinction between the role and status of a chief executive or senior officer in a county council and that of a community council clerk. The Ombudsman does state that he will consider carefully any complaints of alleged inappropriate behaviour by members towards clerks, and will investigate those complaints which are supported by appropriate evidence that a member has gone beyond what might be regarded as a reasonable challenge. The guidance also clarifies and expands upon personal interests. The previous guidance gave bullet points as to when a personal interest should be declared, whilst the new guidance gives more detail as to how that interest should be declared, so a difference in terms of procedure. The new guidance also states that the existence and nature of a personal interest should be declared on every occasion before the business to which it relates is participated in, regardless of whether it has previously been registered. So it seems to adopt of it's better to say it twice than not at all. So whilst most changes are small, in my view, they do add clarity and emphasis to the guidance. So the changes appear to make the guidance easier to follow. The revised guidance also gives a greater number of real-life examples of actual cases considered by the Ombudsman and the decisions of the Standards Committee and the Adjudication Panel for Wales, making it easier for members to understand how the guidance is put into place and into practice. It also sets out these examples by way of numbering, which makes it easy to follow, and also when the guidance is being discussed, it allows people viewing the code to be able to reference which example they're referring to. So rather than saying it's the third example on the bottom of page 6, they can just say it's example 12. So that just clarifies everything for people who are following the code and are discussing it. The new guidance reaffirms that standards committees should be held in public as well, unless there are valid reasons not to do so. So unless I can assist the committee, that is my report.
Does anybody, obviously, have you had a chance to perhaps look through the documents? Is there anything that you think Alec needs to be taking into account, please? Any further comments? Sorry, Mike.
Sorry. Yes, the only thing that caught my eye, and you alluded to it earlier, Aled,
Yeah.
was that the guidance now includes public interest factors. My question is, will this change the outcome of any inquiry that is in progress or will be in progress? My overview is that, as I say, social media now is a big influence on many political and other factors in life, and public interest factors. You know, a lot of the social media comments are made without any justification and stir up a lot of people's emotions about things that are not true, basically. So I worry that public interest factors is going to sort of commit whoever the Ombudsman's team then to taking in comments from the public which really are not relevant. It is a difficult one, I know, but it's just something I wanted to have clarification on, please.
Okay, can I ask first of all, is this query relating to members using social media or the public using social media?
Public.
Okay.
It says public interest factors, so
Okay.
that's why I wanted some clarification, please.
Certainly. The code of conduct is purely in relation to members' conduct. It's not in relation to the public's conduct. Public interest factors aren't factors which relate to how the public behave, but rather whether it's in the public interest that members are held to account for their conduct.
Right.
So if I can expand perhaps then on just talking about the social media factors, the public interest factors have always been there, and they were there in the old guidance. This is the second stage of the test that an ombudsman has to consider when determining whether it's in there, whether a member should be held to account over their conduct. The only thing that has changed from the old guidance is that the ombudsman can consider whether or not there have been previous referrals to the adjudication panel for Wales in respect of that member's own conduct. In respect of members using social media, they should be as careful as they always have, because one of the public interest factors that have always been there is evidence of a course of conduct. Now, what the social media platforms and the increased use of that merely is another conduit or another facility to enable that to happen. So that guidance hasn't changed. The increased use of social media is just another method of doing that. So in respect of the public themselves, I don't think that would be something that would come under this code of conduct. Does that assist at all?
Yes, it clears it up for me now. I can see the route you're travelling and the route the guidance is travelling. I was just concerned that we have lots and lots of, being a councillor, we have lots and lots of bad press and bad social media comments. So I just wanted to clear up the procedure and of the guidance. Thank you very much. It's very helpful. Thank you.
It's okay. I mean, if I can assist further, I mean, obviously, as councillors, it's unfortunate that you get a lot of bad press occasionally particularly through social media from people who are sitting behind their keyboards. What you'd have to be careful of is that you don't reciprocate that, at least in a personal capacity. That is the conduct that would potentially bring it within the scope of the Ombudsman, irrespective of the provocation factors by public.
Yeah, I'm quite aware of that as I'm Chief Whip, so I make sure that message goes out on a fairly regular basis. Thank you for your help, Aled. It's very kind. Thank you. Cheers. Thank you, Chair.
Can I ask Aled a question?
Please.
The fact that Mike Lewis actually needed clarification, one of the things that you said that the report is doing is to make it an easier read.
Yeah.
Do you think then that might just need revisiting to make sure, it's always good to give it to a layperson that isn't within the confines of what you're saying, to say, does this actually read what we want it to say as a heading?
I think the heading of the guidance is quite clear in that it states that it's for members of local authority, or it's for members of community councillors, members of community councils, depending on which council you are a member of. So I think the title of the Code of Conduct makes clear as to who it's aimed at. The rest of it, the message still stays the same. So if you're concerned that there's a message that is being missed here, then obviously the purpose of the consultation is to provide those messages to the Ombudsman to see whether or not that's something that they wish to address. So if there is anything that you want to include on those lines, then I'm happy to take that back to the Ombudsman.
Only from the point that I'm surprised that somebody who has such knowledge as Mike still require for his own purposes a clarification. And the whole point about any document is that it directs clearly and cleanly what they should be reading. And particularly, as you said, it's part of a new clarification in stages 1 and 2. Is that what you said?
Yeah, yes. I mean, the test is exactly the same.
Yes. But it's the reason, sorry, all I was trying to say, I was surprised that we needed to explain. So I just wanted you to review how that is being read. That was all. Sorry.
That's okay. Let me have a quick look.
Because you work on something for so long, sometimes you lose the clarity of what you're trying to say.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, you get blinded by the wood from the trees, don't you?
Yes, yes.
Bear with me a second. I mean, ultimately, it's designed for lay members, and as you say, if you are familiar with jargon, then you accept that jargon because you know what it means.
Absolutely.
If a person is unfamiliar with the terms and they would like clarification, then as I said, this guidance hasn't yet been adopted.
No, I know.
It is a consultation process. So
so we do still have the ability to influence. That's all I'm saying is when we've got this opportunity is not to waste it by saying we'll know what that means. And I'm sorry, Mike, I'm using you as an example. I'm just saying that because he, who I would have thought did have absolute knowledge, still asked for clarification. And I just think, are we not saying that just needs looking at again? That was all, sorry.
Okay, that's fine. So in respect of wanting to having a look at it again, what's the aspect that that needs clarification, just so that I can be clear in my submission to the Ombudsman?
Well, from what Mike Lewis asked, does it refer to the public? The actual wording, I mean, you can go back and hear what he said on the recording, but the terminology that he used,
Members of the public.
Yes, he needed clarification. Sorry, I didn't make a note of what you actually said, but it was
that's fine.
understanding of it.
That's fine. I mean, I'm happy to put that that comment in, just so that the Ombudsman can review that and see whether that is something that he would like to make absolute clear.
Yeah, thank you very much. Anybody else got any comments? Oh, Mike.
Thank you, Chair. The other Mike Lewis. Thank you. One question for Tracy, if I may, and an observation on the consultation itself. So I'll start with the easy question for you, Tracy, if I may. Is there anything in this updated guidance that would make us reflect on the process that we agreed at our last meeting? So I'll pause there if I may, Chair, but I do have one observation that I'll come back to.
No, there's nothing I've said about it. There's nothing that would cause me to think that we need to go back to procedure for this place.
Thank you. And my observation, Chair, I suppose, on the consultation itself, when I think back to the reports that Tracy shares with us at every meeting, every committee meeting on the Ombudsman's initial investigations, I think they fall into two camps. The one is that there was actually no evidence of a breach in the first place, which is fair enough. But the second one, yes, there was, on the face of it, some element of breach, but the Ombudsman decided not to refer it back to a standards committee because there was no perceived public interest, which in a sense is the question that Councillor Mike Lewis asked a couple of seconds ago. And there is some guidance on that, isn't there, in the updated consultation? And there seemed to be, if I can get to it quickly, on page 22 of our pack, about 3 bullet points down, whether there is evidence of, whether the investigation or referral to a standards committee or the adjudication panel is required to maintain public confidence in elected members. And I suppose my observation, I've been surprised while I've been on this committee that the Ombudsman has referred so few of the cases, I don't mean for Swansea per se, but across Wales, that where there appears to have been a breach on the face of it, but he then applied a subjective view as to whether there was a public interest. And that bullet point for me is quite a significant one. If there was on the face of it a breach, then I would have thought, and I'm speaking as a layperson, not as a councillor, I would have thought it was important for that process then to continue to do exactly what it says on the tin in front of us, to maintain public confidence. And I'm also a little concerned about the next bullet point, where there seems to be a little bit of prejudging going on, whether the investigation or referral to a standards committee is appropriate, and I'm paraphrasing, taking into account the sanction that would be applied. Well, that's sort of prejudging the outcome in my mind. Who knows what the sanction would be, because the standards committee hasn't yet considered the evidence and the case. So I suppose I think for me, there's two issues there, Chair. The one is this is our opportunity, I think, to influence the debate around what is actually in the public interest, that the standards committees across Wales and the adjudication panel, to that matter, should be involved in more cases, whether on the face of it, but only obviously in those cases where on the face of it there appears to have been a breach of the code, and that element of prejudging the sanction. Well, that's, you're not sending it to standards committee because you prejudge what the sanction is going to be.
Yes. You're echoing some of my thoughts, actually, Mike. Has Alan got any comment as to anything that has been said
By all means, but these are merely my views. I mean, you're effectively entrusting the ombudsman to be a sort of filter, I suppose, as to what matters should trouble the standards committee. And what the guidance seeks to do is to say, these are the factors that I will consider when determining whether it's in the public interest. However, the decision is that of the ombudsman, and that the new guidance won't change that unless the ombudsman changes the two-part test so that all matters get referred to the standards committee. He's acting as a kind of, as I said, a filter to determine, right, in my view, these are matters that are in the public interest for a standards committee to hear, and therefore I will pass it over to the judgment of the standards committee. The reason, I suppose, is that the sanctions apply is because the more serious the case, the more it's in the public interest for a standards committee to determine. The sanctions, I would imagine, would be bracketed in terms of, well, this type of offence would warrant this type of sanction at the lower end, and this type of offence would attract a higher sanction. Therefore, it's more in the public interest for the standards committee to hear the higher, more serious matters than the lower sanction matters. So the public interest test does depend somewhat on what are the possible penalties were this matter to be upheld. That's how I see it. I appreciate that to some extent there is an element of prejudging, but as I said, he would act as the filter to determine which matters go through, and I don't think that's changed from one guidance to the other.
No, sorry, Mike, come back. Yes.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and I think you're absolutely right, Alid. Certainly on the filter element of it, and I don't think the filter has changed per se. It might have been clarified, but I don't think it's changed. I suppose what I'm clumsily trying to say to the Chair, though, and to the rest of the committee as a question, is this is our opportunity to influence that debate.
Yes.
And for me, as a lay member, especially as the next bullet point talks in terms of retaining confidence of the public in our local elected members, this is the opportunity for us to influence where that slider goes on the scale. And for me, it's too far to the left at the moment.
It is, if I can come back, it is, as you say, exactly, it is your opportunity to influence the debate. What type of comment would you like me to make to the Ombudsman so that he can consider that matter?
Well, if it were left to me, but I suppose, Chair, I am trying to invite my fellow colleagues and members to comment as well as to whether perhaps I'm a lone voice. So I'm happy to Alid. Let me answer Alid, and then, but I am conscious, Chair, I'm the lone voice at the moment. So my view would be that we pick up on those two bullet points that I've just talked about, Alid, please, especially the one about maintaining public confidence. And I would invite the Ombudsman to reflect on those factors that feed into public confidence. And for me, I hear what you say in terms of the sanction element of it. But I've always said, as long as I've been on this committee, for me, the purpose of this committee is not about sanctions. It's about improving public confidence. It's about trying to prevent problems before they occur. It's not about sanctioning people when things have gone wrong. It's about how do we stop those things happening in the first place. I'm at the risk of mixing my analogies too much. If we can stop something when it's at a relatively simple level, it doesn't then escalate into perhaps something which is more serious. So my own personal view is this committee should form a part in that learning process to help members. But anyway, so I suppose I'm inviting, through the consultation, the Ombudsman to reflect on the ability of more referrals to play a part in improving public confidence, and whether that slider is in the right part of the scale at the moment.
So if I can recap then, that the public interest test should be applied more freely towards referrals to standards committee.
That would be the outcome I'm looking for, Aled, because I think I think the evidence he's putting, or the rationale he's putting in front of us, is he is applying a public confidence test as part of the public interest. And for my mind, the more we are seen, the global we, are seen to be investigating these and seeing the process through end to end, the more the public's confidence will be increased. So yes, I am asking him to reflect on whether that public interest test, or it is a test, isn't it, before it's referred to standards committees, is currently in the correct place. But I will repeat one last time, I'm a sole voice at the moment, Chair, and I would want to test the temperature of the committee as to whether I am a sole voice, please.
Margaret?
Thank you. I think Mike has really voiced the concerns that have been expressed many times, certainly since I've joined the Standards Committee. And perhaps I am speaking out of turn, but I do think that I understand, Aled, what you said about the fact that perhaps the Ombudsman thinks that standards need to be monitored centrally and filtered centrally. But I disagree with what you said about that he thinks that the most serious cases should be dealt with by Standards Committee, because from what I've seen in the past, what usually happens is if it's a more serious case, then either it's investigated by his office or it goes to the adjudication panel.
I understand, yeah.
And so the impression I've got, for better or for worse, is that really he has little faith in standards committees in applying a consistent approach right across the board, across all of the counties. And I think it is that lack of faith that has led to perhaps a number of cases that I agree with Mike, really should have been looked at. And there should have been a message getting back. Not a huge sanction, no, but a strengthening of the message, I feel, where it's needed. There aren't many cases of it, but I certainly think there are some cases consistently every year where basically nothing happens, and there has been a breach of the code of conduct. So I don't know what your views are on that.
I'm here to basically be a sponge to feed off the views of the Standards Committee, and as I said to Mr. Lewis, I'm more than happy to put any views across to the Ombudsman. So if that is the view of the committee, then I'm more than happy to put that across as part of this consultation process. So I don't think there's any out of turn speaking here. It is purely an idea, a forum to express views so that the Ombudsman can then consider those views and decide whether additional guidance should be given or whether he's happy with the guidance that has been proposed so far.
I thank both of you, actually, Mike and you, because insofar as you've expressed something, as you rightly said, we have talked about, and this is the one opportunity where if you can influence, then this is when we say it. So no, Mike, you are not the lone voice, thank you. And Margaret, neither are you. Is there anything else anybody else wishes to say, please, to add, so that Aled has got an overall view? Anybody else?
Yes, Chair. The other Mike Lewis now.
Well, that's a way of differentiating, so.
It's getting quite confusing, doesn't it? No, I'd just like to agree with everything that Mike has suggested, the 2 points he suggested. He voiced them far more eloquently than I could have. But yes, those are my concerns, and I go along with everything he says, and he's not just a lone voice. So thank you, Chair.
Yes, Tracy.
Yeah, so, sorry, just from a monitoring officer perspective, really, looking at the guidance, I take your point, Mike. We've had many discussions around this in previous meetings, but we can certainly formulate something to go back to the Ombudsman. But just in terms of the actual guidance itself and from a monitoring officer perspective, how I see it, I think it's a bit of a shame right at the outset that we didn't have a track change version of the guidance. What I had to do was look at the new guidance and then look at the old guidance and try and work out actually how it had changed. We were given some idea about where the changes would be, and they were notably about reference to the HESA and the Calver case and the Article 10. But it was quite tricky trying to work out, you know, you literally had to go through it line by line because there are some very minor tweaks in parts. So that was a bit disappointing, and I think, you know, we are where we are, I guess, but it would have been nice to have had a track change. I do generally welcome it. I think it is a much improved guidance. I found it quite reader friendly, actually. I did find it a lot easier to read. I do welcome in particular, as Aled has pointed out, the numbered examples. We as a committee have always said it's nice to see these examples. It's nice to see where the Ombudsman will investigate a case, what happens in other local authorities. But one thing I think it has failed to do for me, it would have been nice to have seen the sanction. So what you get, and I've got one by way of an example, there was one reference to where a councillor was calling an officer lazy, etc. There was a breach found, but the Ombudsman doesn't then go on in the example to say, well, this was the sanction that the breach attracted, and I think that would have been quite helpful to have had that included. I like the use of the speech bubbles. I like the key points, which Aled has also referred to. And I do welcome, and this is for Councillor Crayford Phil, the role of the clerk in the community council guidance. I think that is really important. And just so everyone knows, that's set out at page 97. It's my page 97. I think my pages might be slightly different to yours, actually. But it sets out the role of the clerk, and it talks about the best councillors will have the clerk and councillors who work as a team with a culture of mutual respect and consideration. It talks about you may question the advice you're given by the clerk, but you must do so in a constructive and objective manner. A lot of the complaints that we've seen coming through the Ombudsman process have related to community clerks. So I welcome that addition in the community and town council's guidance. I don't know whether, Phil, you want to comment on that, but for me, that was really good to see.
Yes, I think, Tracy, you summed up when I read it, and there was a need to clarify the situation of the community council clerk and the relationships there. But I also do support all of my other colleagues that we have discussed this on many occasions, how we do not perceive at times that the Ombudsman sends cases to the Standards Committee, and looking at the training aspect of our role, this is where that would come in. If we were sitting on more cases, then we would be able to train better the councillors how the Standards Committee works and assist the political groups how they manage their members. So I think that's my view.
I agree. Thank you. I agree. Right, Aled, thank you very much. I trust that from that you'll be able to collate perhaps an improved viewpoint. Might not necessarily be a changed viewpoint, but it would be from an informed group that feel as working within it, this would help them equally. Thank you.
Shall I link in with you, Tracy, later on in respect of the responses?
Yeah, if I can just advise you that what I'll do is I'll pick it up with Aled after this meeting. We'll draft something, we'll circulate by email to all the members of the committee, and then if there are any further tweaks, then we'll deal with it that way, and then we'll try and get it off to the Ombudsman by the deadline date. Try and get it out today.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Aled.
Okay. Item 5, Tracy, you're going to
Yeah, I'm not going to add anything to this report. It's fairly self-explanatory. It's the usual report we bring to the committee, just updating you as to what investigations are live with the Ombudsman. You can see there he's not investigating two, and we're waiting for the details of the third matter, but only 3 matters with the Ombudsman at the moment, which is good.
Good. Anybody want to make any further comment? Otherwise, we'll pass on. Okay, thank you. Item 6.
So agenda item 6 is exclusion of the public. You will see that I've noted in the report that the relevant paragraphs to exclude the public are paragraphs 12 and 13. Both of those paragraphs relate to information related to a particular individual and information which is likely to reveal the identity of an individual. And they relate to both agenda items 7 and 8. There are numerous names mentioned, particularly in agenda item 7, and there is some information in agenda item 8. So my advice to the committee would be to exclude the members of the public when dealing with agenda items 7 and 8.
Okay, thank you very much.
Are you all happy with that?
Yes.
Hands? Yeah, unanimous.
Thank you.
So we'll wait until the report